there's further details emerging about Mr. Farage and his association, or the lack of his association now, with the Royal Bank, Coutts. And it makes much more sense now that we can look at the details, because yesterday I'd really picked up the story directly from Farage, where he was saying he was accused of racism and xenophobia, and I think, frankly, that was unrealistic. I don't think he's racist, I don't think he's xenophobic, and therefore Coutts must be wrong. But when you look at the detail, I'm afraid it's quite different. Farage is not racist. Farage is not xenophobic, though he is, of course, linked to people who are. And when I was, undercover in UKIP, I thought UKIP could have had some value. If it was not racist, I would have stayed, and I would have tried to have risen to the top in that party, maybe, or something. But it was racist, and it encouraged racism, and the top rank in UKIP was all racist. It was National Front, English Defence, and all that sort of rubbish. And it was quite frightening, actually, to see the inner workings of that party. People had said it was racist, but you don't know unless you join it and have a look. And there was a particular moment where a senior UKIP MEP made a stupid racist joke about the man who is now the First Minister in Scotland. And Farage says, well, it's just a joke. He didn't take it seriously. And that is why that racism flooded out, and that is why I suggest the Brexit debate was hijacked by racism and xenophobia. But Coutts, his 40-page report, goes on to identify Farage as a grifter and a chancer. Absolutely. I think that's perfectly reasonable. And they identify his friends, Djokovic, his criticism of the king. I think for a bank that identifies itself as the Royal Bank, that's perfectly reasonable to then say, we're not going to have you. Farage says, well, is this some sort of Stasi-style surveillance document? Maybe. And he says, well, he hasn't yet been convicted. The hatred, the metropolitan upper middle class prejudice comes through about him. His identification with Brexit and the shift, he says, to the left, the shift to wokeness. But the dossier specifically names him as a politically exposed person. So in other words, Coutts lied. So I think, on the one hand, Farage is making too much of the racism and xenophobic complaint, but on the other hand, he's quite right. Coutts said that it was not said that he was being told that he wasn't being shoved aside because he was politically exposed, but because he didn't meet the financial criteria. No, the document demonstrates that Coutts lied, and that's not good for a bank. Equally, I think Coutts has been indiscreet. And I think that's also not good for the bank. Coutts denied that this the politically exposed issue was a reason for getting rid of him, for their banking defenestration. They've also linked him with Trump, and with and apparently there's many mentions of Russia and his pro-Putin position. Well, he denies that. In fact, he also denies the claim made under parliamentary privilege in the chamber that he had received money from Russia today to the amount of £548,000, 557, made by Chris Bryant. He says it's not true. But, surely Coutts, managing his account, could see whether or not that sum had been deposited or in his account. In the end, Coutts has concluded he represents a material and reputational risk for the bank, and I think that's a reasonable judgment. But the claims I heard yesterday that he was racist and xenophobic, I think he would be quite right to contest those. And also, the claims that he was removed because he didn't meet the financial criterion, that also is a lie.